Thanks for watching this video about Vassal. I had a few problems with the tutorial videos about Vassal, and I'd like to fill in just a couple of the gaps. So anything that's mentioned in those videos I won't be covering. What I will be covering though is how to set up player sides in Vassal, just a very basic way of doing it. I'm not an expert on Vassal, but I've had to go through a few difficulties trying to find this particular detail, and to me it's fundamental to the whole thing. You know, you've got to know what sides your players have got, and where the counters are going to be used by individual players only, or if they're available to all players. And you also have to decide how many players there are, which sounds like a silly question, but in this module here, Belter, that I'm creating, each player can start at one of three levels. They can start as a prospector, a corporation, or as a partnership. So there are in effect 13 players. There's also, because there's a fifth player, if there is a fifth player, then that introduces a fifth player called the PKF. You also have to decide whether you need several copies or single copies of counters. In Belter, almost every counter is an individual counter, so you have to copy every single counter, but many games don't have that. They usually have you can make several copies of one counter, and that means you don't have to scan everything, and you don't have to copy everything either. And it also determines what sort of options you take in the module. Okay, so once you've you've decided how many players there are and all the rest of it, we have to go to definition of player sides. Now you see here I've got 13 different players. I've got 3 players for each of the red players, 3 green, 3 orange, just because I don't know how to make it so that you can have 3 of each type. It's just as easy to create 13 of them, and it doesn't create much space on the screen when you do this. There's an option, by the way, when you do this, to change the icon for the retire button, which is the one that allows another player to change sides. It appears up in the corner here, so that's where you do that. And the important thing about this definition screen is that you have to know exactly what you've written on each one of these, because that's what determines what goes to which player, is exactly what you've written there. And it doesn't allow you to copy and paste it. So I actually took a screenshot of this in order to be able to make sure I got the right thing. Right, so having defined your player sides, the next thing you've got to do is you've got to create a map window, or a private window, or a player hand. Each of those is done at the very top level, that is right at the top here where it says the module name, and you right click and you choose what in my case was a private window. If you want a map window, or a map window just allows anybody to see it. It's just a normal window. A player hand is what you use when you're using cards. But in my case, I want to have the option of only having certain things seen. So I'm using a private window, and it's also only for counters. So we choose Add Private Window, and I've created a private window for each player. You see here, Let's have a look at the orange window. Now this is where I was talking about the naming of your players. So you've got to write exactly here what you have written in your player definitions. And then there's this important button here where it says visible to all players. So if I untick that, then this stuff will not be visible to all the players. In fact, it may still be visible, but the players won't be able to click on it. And then we've got this other important thing here where it says the map name. This we'll be using later. And also that's what comes up on the screen. So the player will see this. You have lots of other naming things, but that's what the player will see. I changed the background color to black because this is a space game and most of the pictures have a black background. And then we've got down here an include tool button to show hide. So that's how I got these buttons up the top here, by ticking that. If you don't do that, then it just appears as a floating screen. This can be annoying. And you get the option to change what the button looks like by selecting an icon for it. So I've done that too. Don't have to worry about anything else, so we've done that. So having created a private window or a player hand or a map window, we then have to create a map board. And you just leave this alone. Oh, you right click on, because it's a subset of the private window, you right click on the private window line and you choose add board. So with the board, the most important thing is the cell width and the cell height. That's actually the pixel width and the pixel height. Okay, so that determines the size of the board that the player will have, which in this case is going to be their counter tray. Okay, and also, since I'm going to be using a picture on the board, that'll determine how much of the picture gets seen. All right. So I've created a map board. You see here it's got add board. So you have to keep add board, that type thing. So yeah, you add board, and I've called it the orange operation center. And this is where if I want the player's counter tray to have a picture on it, then that's where I put it in here, the board image. And it doesn't matter too much. The name here is important in that the things below the other things will refer to that name. So we created the boards and all the rest of it. The next thing is we now have to create and when you do create a board, you'll see all these other stuff. Well, I haven't done anything with that. Don't worry about it. All these other things are just automatically put in. Now, what we have to do next is create an @start stack. You'll see I've got a couple here. Well, actually, I've got, and the @start stack is where I'm going to put the pieces. So this was described in one of the Vassal 101 videos, the @start stack, as the only way that you can be sure that only one copy of the counter will be available to the player. If you use just an ordinary ordinary map board, the pieces will all be there, but you can just keep dragging them over and over again onto the board from one board to the other. It gives you an unlimited number. Even if you don't use the cloning attribute, it doesn't make any difference. You can still create as many copies of that thing as you like. So by using a @start stack, you make sure that the player only receives one copy of that counter. So we were looking at orange and we've got the map boards, and let's have a look at an empty @start stack. Right, so you'll notice I've actually got quite a few @start stacks here. They're all next to one another, and that's what they look when they're empty with no counters in. This is what they look like, and that's a good thing to do. You see, I've created the same, because each player has the same set of counters. It's best to create @start stacks for all of them first, and then put in all the counters second. That way you can just copy and paste your @start stack. So this Seeker one, for instance, I can right click on it and choose copy, and then I can go down to the blue one, and then I can right click and I can actually on the map board and choose paste type thing. So when you've got to do it over and over again, that's quite helpful to do it that way, rather than put in all the pieces and then do it all again. Okay, so let's have a look at the Seekers @start stack. Notice that this is where it says it belongs to the board, the orange operation center. So that's your map boards up here. Your orange operation. So you must make sure that gets filled out. Don't let it say any board. And then it says X position and Y position. So this is one stack of counters, and it's showing where it's going to go on the board. So it's good to put it in some sort of position like that just to begin with, because if you don't, then the option is 0, 0, and you know, everything will get lost in the corner. So, and you can move, and the reposition stack button will become available once I put some counters in there. That's the other thing about this. So let's put in some Seekers. So we right click on the @start stack, and we're going to add multiple pieces. So now the important thing with this is that you could save a lot of time by making sure that all of your counters are in specific directories. So when you come to do this load multiple pieces option, it will choose the correct. See, I've got all my orange counters together. I could have saved time here if I put each type of counter in its own folder, but I haven't. So I get this. Okay. It's important to have each type of counter as a separate stack, because it's so difficult in Belter to pick out individual counters from a stack. And also it makes things a lot quicker and easier for the player. So here we have, with adding multiple pieces, we've got the option of either ticking a counter or writing over here how many copies of it we want. We only want one copy of every counter, so we're just going to untick everything that's not a Seeker. And this saves an enormous amount of time because I've got to add 14 counters individually otherwise. Although, and as I said, I could have saved even more time by properly setting up the folders beforehand. I think the seekers are right at the bottom of the list. So there's a lot of accounting that has to be done in Belter. So every single piece has a number. You have to be able to account for every single piece. So that's why I've got so many counters here. And there we go. There are all the seekers. No. Let's get rid of the other ones. That's done. Okay, now the next thing, it says edit piece template. Now this is where if you've created prototypes, you again can save time because you can now just click on prototype, add, and I've created one for seekers. So we'll choose OK and save, and so now we're giving it all the, they've made all of them have the prototype attributes for seekers. And we'll click OK and say yes. And there they all are. They're all the seekers. Okay, so now if we look at, if we double click now on the at start stack for seekers, the reposition stack button is now available. If we click on that, and we can see, well, it's going to put it there. That's, yeah, maybe it could be put somewhere else. I don't know, down here maybe. If we click on this one, show our other stacks, we can see where everything else is. You know, maybe along that arm isn't such a bad idea. The thing is with the stack is that it will, if you put it too close to the top, then you can't see the top of the stack. So probably around about the middle here is good for a big stack. I don't know, I think maybe I'll just leave it there for now. Maybe putting them all along this arm is an idea. I'll choose OK and OK. And then we'll save it. And let's see what we've done. We'll choose to be orange. We'll be an orange corporation, the Mao Kikowski Mercantile Corporation. The villains of the Expanse. But you're obviously going to play a good player. You're not going to do anything nasty like put proto-molecule everywhere. So let's have a look, see what happens if we click on that. And there we go. There's all the stacks of counters. You see what I mean about, you know, if you put the refinery up here, you can't actually see where everything goes. Also notice that the name Orange Operations Center that appears there. And that's the only thing that the player does see about all that naming stuff that you put in. So there's your counters. Right. Now the other thing to notice is this, the peacekeeping force, the UN Security Council peacekeeping force is grayed out, and that's because when I chose that one, I told it to hide it. The other ones I said make it available to all players because all players now need to be able to see what's going on, make sure there's no cheating or anything. But I'm the orange player, so if I click on red, you'll see I cannot move any of the red pieces. And what I was saying earlier about deciding which counters are available to everybody and which ones are not. So I've got the markers here, for instance. These markers are available to everybody. So you have to decide which ones are like these, like for instance ownership counters and spaceship damage counter, or fun things like the asteroid bomb, which you can fire an asteroid from one place to another. All those have to be available to all players, and also it doesn't matter how many copies of them there are, so I don't have to use a net start stack. So that's all I've got to say, I think. Thanks for watching.